Great to have you here for another update episode, sitting down with my friend Saz. Saz returns to share her journey of nearly 3 years of sobriety, reflecting on the challenges, growth, and the lessons learned along the way. Interesting thing I found out, Saz's initial goal was for 1 year of sobriety. And here we are, almost 3 years later. Incredible episode. Hope you enjoy it. Have a listen. Before we jump into this episode, just reflecting back over 200 plus stories here on the podcast, I want to first thank all of you for continuing to listen and supporting the show. And two, I was just thinking how grateful I am that this has went the way it has. When I started this podcast, I had two things in mind. I didn't want to be the main character, and I also didn't want to tell everybody the way that they needed to do it. And I think what the stories bring is something very unique, is that you can pick and choose what parts relate to you and what things that you could try out or that might be helpful to your own journey, but also to hear how people's lives change and how a lot of people shared that exact same story of getting sober and not drinking wasn't possible. They never believed it to be possible. And then here they are living potentially their best life on the other side of things and making big changes in their life and impacting a lot of people around them, if not everybody around them, and making the world a better place because they decided to step away from one thing that was no longer serving them in their life, and that was drinking. And it doesn't matter how much, how frequent, what you're drinking. The only thing that matters for this journey is this one question: would your life be better without it? Another part of it is be easy on yourself. Like being hard on ourselves that things aren't working out the first time or the second time we try something. I don't know that I'm convinced it's going to get us anywhere. I think we have to learn from the times we fall down and utilize what we learned the next time we stumble. Get connected with other people. Doing this alone, although possible, extremely difficult. The game completely changes when you surround yourself with other people that are on a similar path. And there's this one quote that always stands out to me: is shame dies when stories are told in safe places. And there's so much truth to that because we feel alone on the journey. We feel like there's nobody else who understands. We feel like we're the only people who have done what we've done. And I think the stories help as well in that direction, to break down the barriers that we're the only person that's been through it, because that is far from the truth. Although we take different paths to get to where we've gotten, a lot of the paths I feel like intersect. And I don't believe that anything in this world happens on accident. You found this podcast, or this podcast found you. You're on this journey for a reason. Whether it makes sense or not right now, maybe one day it will. Now let's get to Saz's story. Welcome back, everyone, to another update episode. We got Saz with us today. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me back. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, of course. If anybody didn't catch the first episode that you joined me with, maybe share with us sort of the Cliff Notes version and what things were like at the end and when you got sober.
Yes, of course. So, yes, I got sober almost 3 years ago on my 30th birthday. I kind of did it as a birthday present to myself because for the longest time I was going in and out of like little periods of abstinence and kind of like not really committing to it fully, always being like, I'll drink again. Like I'll take a break, but I'm going to drink again, obviously. And then it got to a point where I was just like, let me try and do a year. So that's what I started on my 30th birthday. And then, as I say, I could never just stop at one. So here we are nearly 3 years later. And I guess like my journey started when I was maybe about 16, 17. It kind of went from an eating disorder into binge drinking that carried on throughout like the entirety of my 20s. And then I was just like, do you know what? I don't want to carry this into my 30s. New decade, fresh start. And I think the way my brain works, it's really helpful for me to have like deadlines and like fresh starts. And like I can't just in the middle of a week be like, I'm going to start exercising or eating healthy. I have to start from like a Monday or the first day of the month, things like that. So that's how it worked for me.
Yeah. Wow. And the best birthday present you ever gave yourself, or what? Yeah.
Honestly, like it was funny because that happened on my birthday. And then 2 weeks later, I lost my job. So I was like, why? Like, I was like, this is not, at the time, my mindset was like, this was not a good idea. The timing's off, da da da. But I think that really it was the best gift because that's how I was able to navigate all the kind of obstacles that came up throughout that first year in particular.
Yeah. Yeah, it's always hindsight's always 2020 looking back. At the time it's hard to see how we're going to navigate through something, but looking back it's like, maybe that was the right time for this or the right time for that to
Yeah. And
push us
like,
forward a bit.
and switching the perspective up, like just like you said, of like it being a gift. So I think the whole time when I like wasn't committed to trying to quit, I was seeing it as a deprivation, and I was seeing it almost like a punishment. Like I was taking something away from myself that was making
Mm-hmm.
me less happy and less connected to people. When really that was the complete opposite. Now I know. So it was just kind of
Mm-hmm.
seeing it as like a fresh start, like a new opportunity, and like that reframe was really helpful in like keep staying with it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so interesting because I feel like, and I would be so curious to know how that became part of your life, right? Because I mean, we grow up, and I think when I was a kid, right before I ever drank, when I was just a younger kid, I didn't wake up and think about drinking. Drinking wasn't really part of my life. And then once I started drinking, I had that same perception too. Like, what am I going to do for fun? How am I going to connect? It's attached to my identity in all these certain ways. It's kind of who I was known as. Like, what was it in your life? If you could put a finger on it to say, this is the story I kind of believed in my relationship with alcohol, to where it seemed to maybe impossible to walk away.
Yeah, I remember you saying in the last time we talked about how alcohol didn't start off as a problem. It was almost like the solution. You were like Eureka, like this is like the magic potion that I can like
Yeah.
not awkwardly talk to people at parties and feel like I'm fitting in and all those things that maybe as kids we really struggled with, of like connecting with others. And this was all of a sudden the answer of like how we could do that. And that's why it becomes part of what we feel is like our personality, because it's how we bond with others, how we process really difficult emotions, how we celebrate, how we do all
Mm.
those things. So it's so wrapped up in like every aspect of our lives. And then often for us who are a bit sensitive to using it to cope or relying too heavily on it, there comes a time where it starts to slip into that slippery slope of like, I'm starting to drink the next day. And, is this part of my personality, or is this something that's actually a little bit darker that I'm struggling with? And it's not always fun, or is it ever fun anymore? And I think that something I've been reflecting on recently, of like something that surprised me in my
Mm.
sobriety, in my almost like 3 years of it, is I never thought that I wouldn't miss it.
Mm.
So I was always like, oh, you know what? It's always going to be something that I'm like, oh, the good old days, and I wish I could go back. And I never thought that I would be like, there'd be times I would be on a whole holiday and I'd be like, oh, I didn't even think about that once. Or I'd be at a party and I'm not like, I'm laughing so hard with people that I don't even consider, oh, I wish I had a beer right now. So I think that was like a major reflection for me of like, it
Mm.
really isn't part of my personality, and like it never was. It was just what it was kind of leading me to believe, and that's why it's so insidious, isn't it?
Yeah. And like what you mentioned there too, it happens over time. It doesn't necessarily happen. I mean, everybody's got their own journey and their own unique relationship in a sense, right? But it doesn't just happen like the first time necessarily. It can be this sort of slow process to where it creeps into maybe more areas of our life, right? And then at the end, you hear it all the time. I'm not going to go places where there's not drinking. I'm not going to go to a restaurant where they don't have alcohol. It becomes all these things. And I think at the time when we're going through it, it's maybe not even a full on conscious thought. It's maybe more in the subconscious of, we just know we need to be a place where we're going to be able to drink and be comfortable. And it just becomes sort of part of the everyday thing. So you're mentioning now too, you're in the beginning, it's like, this is always going to be something that I'm going to miss in a sense. And now, with the growth, and I think that speaks a lot to, and correct me if I'm wrong here, But I know on my own journey, it speaks to the work that I did on the underlying reasons why I drank in the first place. And not to say that I've perfected everything or I've made every improvement in my life that I need to, but I feel like once I removed the alcohol from my life, the other stuff really became elevated. I became more aware of where I'm uncomfortable and what was really going on beneath the surface and all the masks I was wearing. And once I was able to work on that stuff and work through that stuff, I just don't have that desire to run, escape, and potentially and probably burn things down again. Was that helpful for you too? The work, connection, community, being plugged in and talking about it helpful?
100%. And I think I love how you word it as like the different masks and like the different, and I think that's so wrapped up in like that people pleaser
Yeah.
mentality that so many of us have of like, and I still struggle with it. And especially now that I'm not drinking, I'm like, well, I'm not drinking, so I feel bad. So I'm going to maybe stay out longer, or I'm going to, you know, I'm going to go to the club with them because I feel bad. I don't want to ruin their night. And I've had to really be like, stop that. You don't want to go. Like, listen to your body, listen to yourself.
Mm.
Like, no. But I really would agree that community was so helpful. I did raw dog it in the first 6 months. I deleted like all of my social media. I didn't go to any, like, I've never been to any meetings. Like, I really felt that I had to go through like a grieving process.
Mm-hmm.
And that for me was really helpful because I think I needed to just like accept, like go through that acceptance of like, this is what's happening. Like, and maybe, yeah, I had a few distractions thrown in, but really I had to just let all the feelings like and rock with them and, the intensity of them, especially as someone who feels very deeply, but who has for most of their adult life never allowed themselves to like sit with it, has always escaped and abandoned through drinking and through blackouts, and that was really difficult. But after 6 months, when I was like, right, I'm ready, and I got on Instagram and I created my account, and being like, having gone from a period of time where I felt like I was so dishonest and I felt like I didn't really know who I was and I wasn't really honest with myself or anyone that was around me. I was always, even if it's something like as simple as like, oh, I wasn't really that drunk last night, or oh yeah, I remember, pretending that I remembered, like I would maybe remember like something random, like, oh, like Johnny was there, and then they're like, oh yeah, well you weren't that drunk, but like that's the only part of the night I remember, just to try and like throw in a fact to like put them off my scent. And I just felt like I was constantly like keeping up with my own like lies, and I'm not like, and it made me feel like so disconnected from myself because I was like, is this the kind of person I am? Am I a liar? Am I like dishonest? Can I not be trusted? So I feel like in sobriety, honesty was so important to me. And maybe too much so. Sometimes I look back on maybe certain podcasts I did, or, captions I wrote, and I'm like, sweet Lord, I really didn't hold back there. It's like my whole life story. Like all the details, the gory details that like my younger self would be deceased if she heard me talking about, that I like
Yeah.
I would have gone to the ends of the earth to try and cover up, because by exposing them, I was like admitting that it was a problem. But now that I have kind of accepted that, and it's not my life anymore, it feels so much easier when you're distanced from it to talk about it. And then in the help of helping people who are still in the thick of it and in the trenches to go through that process as well, I guess.
Yeah. And that was one thing too that I remember after we did our episode, and two, you sent me that note the other day too, the extremely honest and vulnerable with how you showed up and shared. And I was just curious, was that the plan going into it? Or is that just naturally the way things go?
Going into what, like sobriety, or the chat
Yeah,
with
like
you?
the chat, the other episode.
I think well, you just have a certain like candidness and like you create this environment where like I just felt safe. And I think that often, whether it was in my drinking days or in some, unfamiliar environments in sobriety, I just didn't feel safe. And I felt maybe like I was going to be judged, or, I people wouldn't get it. Whereas like when I was talking to you, I just felt like their judgment didn't even remotely come into it. And I was like, right, let's roll up the sleeves here and get into it. Like there's, why not? And that's such a
Yeah.
beautiful quality for you to have, especially when you're, having these really vulnerable conversations with people about like some of their darkest moments, that they feel safe and comfortable to open up to you. And although
Mm.
it was quite maybe after, it's almost like not as nowhere near as like traumatic, but on a night out where I would spill my guts during a
Mm.
blackout, and then I'd wake up and can't remember what I said. It felt so much more intentional that I was sharing because it's something that I wanted to share and that I felt would be valuable and that I felt you would understand and be able to connect with me on. So although it
Mm.
was quite scary to be so open, it was also like very therapeutic, and I felt very. I think after the episode I had like a little like cry, and especially the outpouring of like support and kindness from people of like,
Mm.
because you put yourself out there, and often we've been in situations with people who can drink without blowing their lives up, or as you say, like burning your life to the ground without doing
Mm.
those things. So you often feel like you're the black sheep, or the one that like sticks out, or the one that no one really understands. So there's something incredibly beautiful about the sober community where you'll put out something that you've done or you felt, and people all rise up to say, that was me too, and like I understand, and like I'm here for you, and that was really special.
Yeah. No, that's so beautiful too. And I'm so happy to hear that, people send the message and appreciate things too. But I've always appreciated that from especially your posts, right? Like your posts that you put out about the things that you work through and the things you're working through and the things you've been through. And it is, I think it just, I don't know, in my life, being honest about it, um, even though it's difficult, I think anytime we're honest, my fear is anyway, my small little fear, it's gotten a lot smaller over the years, is like, all of this can be thrown back at me. And I did have relationships too in life where that was the case. So it's like, always that. But I'm like, you know what? If it helps 100 people and one person has something negative, like I'm all in on that all day, And so I've always appreciated that level of honesty from you. And I feel like that can give other people some safety in maybe a runway for them to kind of get honest with themselves. Cause I feel like the denial, the lack of awareness, and the lack of being honest with ourselves are sort of three keys that can keep us stuck with this cycle continuing, So I think us sharing our story of what it's like, because we've all, I think, been at some point, been that person to say, I'm so much different than everybody else. My thing is different. Nobody understands it. Nobody gets it. And although all of us have taken a different journey and a different path and had different experiences in life, I think the way that alcohol and our relationships with it, there's a lot of intersection, and a lot of things we can relate with each other on. So sharing our stories, it's like maybe permission for somebody else to have a look and say, maybe I relate to that, and maybe I can make the change when it feels difficult.
Yeah, and I completely agree with the intersectionality of it. I think my foot in the door of like sober curiosity was on my runs. I would listen to Catherine Gray's um, book, The Unexpected Joy of Being Sober. And
Mm.
although our experiences were different, and she would, identify herself differently to me, and the way her drinking showed up in her life was different, I never was like, oh, and I have to remind myself when I'm like reading or listening, like that when I share things, like there are people who maybe quit drinking for health issues or because they just don't fancy it. And maybe it never got as dark as it did for them as maybe it did for me at times. But when I was listening to her story, there was never a time where I was like judging her or being like, oh, I don't relate to that. Like, I don't, I was so in awe of her honesty and her, things that I was like, I can't believe she admitted that. Wow, that's so brave. Like, I don't think I could ever do that. And then I'm here like, here's like the deepest, darkest secrets to all you strangers on the internet. But yeah, I take like, and you sharing your story and everyone who's been so brave to speak so honestly about like
Mm.
the most difficult things that have happened to them. It's such inspiration for you to share, even if it looks different, to share knowing that some people will relate to it. And even if they don't relate exactly, it'll help them to even be a bit more honest with themselves, or reflect, or just anything. Just like take a
Yeah.
pause to kind of think about it.
Yeah. And yeah, and that's such a good point too, is that we're not going to relate with where everybody's been or the journey everybody's taken. But I think if we're honest with ourselves, we listen to a 1 hour episode of somebody's story. I think there's definitely going to be parts of it too. And none of us take that first drink, just like I didn't have my first drink and say, oh, a couple of years from now, this is just going to be a disaster.
Yeah.
And that's what I always mention to people too, is it's like this gray area drinking, which a lot of people relate to. A lot of people relate to, but it can be a very confusing place too, because things are kind of together. But on the inside, it goes back to what you mentioned, and I think that's where it all starts. Before anything external, before any of these rock bottoms we see in the Hollywood movies, it starts happening internally, where we're not in alignment with our authentic self. We can feel it, like, maybe in our soul or something, right? About it's like, okay, my behaviors are not lining up with who I am, right? The dishonesty for some people might be the sneakiness, and we're just out of character. At least, I was. And I think that's where it kind of first shows up. But the longer we keep this around, the more likelihood for things to maybe go more astray,
Yeah.
So it's always like, even if that's how we're feeling now, there's there's no objection from my end to say, hey, let's get ahead of it. Because these other stories we hear from people too, we never know. I mean, will say, I always said, for me, oh, I'll never do that. Oh, I draw the line in the sand, and then there I was. And I crossed over that one. And I find in my life, every time I crossed over one, it was a little bit easier to cross over the next one, the next line in the sand. And then it was a little bit easier to push the limits again. So it's always being mindful that, maybe things aren't completely out of control right now. But I believe that it really only could take one event, one heavy event in our life for us to lean more and more, in that direction. So getting ahead of it is never a bad thing.
Definitely. And I think, like, kind of what we had touched on, at the start of this conversation about gratitude, of like, I know how lucky I am, and I work, we spoke about it last time. I work in communities of vulnerable people who do struggle with addiction and struggle with trauma. And, you know, what they say, I'm not sure of the exact statistic, but that you're only, a certain amount of barriers away from homelessness and things like that. Like, there's so many, and we have, like, I'm so blessed to have these protective factors, but that made me say, oh, I'll never maybe do this, or I'll never be at that level of whatever, on the spectrum of addiction or substance use. But you don't know what life's going to throw at you. You don't know. And, sometimes it doesn't, for some of us, like, it doesn't take. And that's something I also struggled with. Like, why do like, my life, I have all these protective factors. So why am I showing up in my life in such a chaotic way when my siblings are all, inverted commas, normal, and I'm just this complete header that's like, what is wrong with her? Like, what? Like, nothing happened to me, but like, that doesn't matter sometimes, So it's
Yeah.
so complex, and it's so difficult. And as you said, once you open the floodgate a little bit, it's just so much easier for behaviors to start slipping, and for you to get further disconnected from yourself, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great way to put it. I love how you said it there at the end, disconnected from ourselves. In the other part of the story, we believe or think we're more connected.
Yeah.
I mean, that was one of the things that kind of blew me away. I thought, of course, the drinking, the partying, getting together for people, the friendships, the relationships, it was all just drinking. And I was like, this is what brings us together. What I realize now, looking back, is that I just was really uncomfortable, and the drinking just made me comfortable. Check the boxes. I didn't have to worry about my insecurities or my thoughts racing or acceptance. If I came with drinks in my younger years, it was like, you're the coolest person around,
Yeah,
man.
we're
Great
happy
job.
to see you.
Yeah, it's like great. I was like, yeah, you guys want more? Like, I'll make it happen. Whatever we got to do here. I was just looking for a place to belong, and that's the first sort of thing that made that happen,
Yeah.
very predictably happen. So I leaned into it, and it transforms as we kind of, get older. But when I look back now, it was the ultimate disconnect. I mean, we weren't having vulnerable, honest conversations. We did the best we could with what we had. But yeah, there was no genuine connection. There's nothing better than the connection of sobriety with others and also with ourselves.
Oh, definitely. And it sounds like just what you're saying there. It's like you were like the green light guy. Like if people wanted to be green lighted, like that was me. I'm like, if you want a good time, if you want to stay out all night, you know who to call. Or like, if you want to feel better about your drinking, come talk to me because I'll be the biggest mess in this room without a doubt. And I think it was really uncomfortable in the beginning to show up in friendships and social situations with, and I keep saying this with inverted commas, but like nothing to offer but ourselves. So we're not offering a good time, like, oh, I can greenlight you in drinking or I can escape with you. It's just showing up like as you. And there's something really scary and vulnerable about that in case you're not accepted. Because the drinking thing was always a bit of a comfort blanket of like, if people didn't like me, I could blame, oh, it's because I was too drunk. If I didn't really get on with people, oh, it's because, I could always blame drinking. Whereas if I'm showing up as I am, and we're not vibing, that's because we don't jam. It's because we don't like click because, I'm showing up as myself. And I don't
Yeah.
know about you, but one of my favorite things in sobriety, and although it's really difficult sometimes because it feels like everyone else, when they're a few pints in and they're getting on with everyone, I'm so
Yeah.
aware of like who makes me comfortable. And I'm aware of like picking up on like good energy. And there's certain spaces that I'm just like, I don't feel like I can be myself here. And that's a signal for me to maybe not to go to the bar and nail a bottle of wine, but to bounce, do you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that
Yeah.
for me, that's been really important to like in that connection with yourself and getting to know yourself again, of being like, there's certain spaces that are, I don't feel comfortable here and I can do something about it. I don't have to drink my way out of it. I can just remove myself or,
Yeah.
show up in spaces that I do feel comfortable in.
Yeah. That's massive, massive growth throughout the process, right? You mentioned at the beginning and I think a big part of it too, and there's layers to it, is that we're like, I was just unfamiliar with showing up anywhere without drinking. So one of my earliest mentors told me like, it's just all new. Like try to do anything new, try to go skiing. I've never skied before. It was like, you're going to be uncomfortable. It's going to feel a little bit wonky and you might look a little bit silly. And that's kind of what I looked like in the early days, right? Like, what do I do with my hands here? Put them in my pocket, I guess.
Bambi on ice.
Not really knowing what to do. But as you go, and I think that's part of the development, right? About finding new things we enjoy, connecting with the right people. It's all that four quarters thing, right? Four quarters, not 100 pennies as far as our connections, right? And having more meaningful ones instead of, when I was drinking, I just wanted to be everybody's pal. I never wanted to be alone. So it was like, I've got to make as many friends as I can, impress as many people so that if, I want to hang out or have company or do whatever, I've got a running list and feel like I have this level of importance. People need me. Like if I didn't go, like they're not even going to have any fun if I don't show up. Believing that kind of
Yeah.
madness, right? Like I have to go, and just that sort of stuff just doesn't excite me anymore. I'm with you on that 100% too. Like just finding the places where not only am I accepted, but I feel like I can be part of and be myself, And for us too, like we live like, you know, paths that not everybody's talking about. A lot of people probably experience, but not everybody's talking about it. And I was talking with my wife the other day and I'm like, you know what? Like I've been through all this stuff, trouble, jail and stuff. And I'm like, I don't think anybody around me when I take my kids to the bus stop and I'm like, nobody knows any of this stuff, So I can get in my own head sometimes, right? Like, what if when I bring my kids over for them to go to somebody's house, or we invite somebody over here, and I think it's probably a common thing to like do a quick Google search, and I'm like, how is that going to play out? Is it going to affect my kids? Like, what are people's perception going to be, right? Of finding out all of this stuff. But I also think it all goes back to, we lived a life that wasn't in alignment for so long. For me, I have to live a life of alignment, whether other people accept it or not. This is peace for me to be who I actually am. And I can't go
Oh,
back and change, what I did.
yeah.
Right. It just is.
Yeah.
So,
No, that's
um,
that's so so lovely. And just when you said that there about like just like finding peace and just being like authentically yourself, it's funny because when you're dating or meeting new people, like if I'm traveling and people are like, "Hey, let me grab your Instagram," and I'm like, uh, like the last post is this reel about like the darkest moment of my life, and they're just like, "What the like?" It's this balance of like you know it is authentically yourself, but like what's it's still up to us how much we want to share. I know
mm,
it's different when it's in a public forum, but there is a
mm,
beauty of that. Like when I was drinking, I would just overshare to everyone without
mm,
really being intentional about it. But now we have this opportunity to like share little bits of our life when it feels comfortable to us, and when we trust
mm,
people, and when we want to let people in. And then
mm,
I guess that's the whole thing with like dating or making friends. Like you're so much more aware if there's a connection there, or like because you're conscious of how you're feeling. And if you're gonna know in the first, like I know pretty quickly if I'm feeling something or not. Whereas
yeah.
if you're kind of a couple of you get ready, have a couple of glasses of wine, you go on the date or meet up or whatever, and you don't even you're just that's not the point anymore of connecting. It's just kind of
Yeah.
how long can we stay in this bar until we go back to yours here? And like you're going through the motions and you're just trying to not be alone. Like that fear of like, this
Yeah.
has to go well. I have to force this because I just can't go home by myself. And there is a real
Mm,
comfort. And I've seen a lot of women, especially in
mm,
sobriety, who have gained this comfort in being by themselves and like
mm,
feeling whole themselves. And that's just,
mm.
I think that's really beautiful. And I think that that's it's a bit of a phenomenon at the minute where these like women are doing a lot of
Yeah.
the work and healing and being like, I can meet my needs, and
Mm,
I don't feel like I have to settle, and I don't feel like I have to make myself smaller or
mm,
drink to get through either social situations, intimate situations that don't align
mm.
with me, because that's the only way I can cope. But instead they're being like, they're knowing when to take themselves out of situations, and like I think that's amazing as well.
Yeah, that is. Yeah. A lot of freedom on that side of things. Interesting you brought up too with like the dating, right? So um you go into it there in sobriety, you get that spidey sense maybe of like, hey, there's compatibility here, whether it be relationships, dating or friendships, and you can figure that out. I feel like in my drinking days, it would take me about 6 months to figure it out, as opposed to now, maybe 6 minutes. And
Yeah,
I would spend 6 months to figure it out. Like, and then you reflect back on it, you're like, this probably shouldn't have been a thing for 6 months,
because
So that's a great,
and I feel like it's exactly it, and I feel like it's really linked to like not trusting yourself and not trusting your own
mm,
decisions, and that
mm,
disconnection from yourself of being like, I don't know if I really feel it, but like I don't really, maybe I'll just give it a chance, and I don't really like. Whereas
mm,
now it's like, no, like I can't, like I'm not lying to myself here. Like this is not for me, and
mm,
it's so difficult now, and it feels so uncomfortable to put
mm,
yourself in situations or to do things that you're not aligning with. Like when you're sober and you're like innocent, and it's just
mm,
so uncomfortable to be like forcing yourself into something. Whereas when you're drinking and those inhibitions are, away, and you're feeling numbed, and you kind of like can go along with stuff that you're not comfortable with.
mhm,
I feel like now it's so much easier. Not necessarily easier, because it's still difficult as a people pleaser, but it's easier to
mm.
identify. So as you said, 6 minutes, and you're like, yeah, this isn't gonna happen. And that's
Yeah.
you can still have a good time. You can put yourself out there. Not
Mhm,
everything's gonna work, but knowing that you have the comfort of, and you have the power and freedom of knowing that you're okay by yourself, and you don't
mm.
need anyone to complete you, like that's like badass.
Yeah, I love that. Badass. Just heading towards wrapping up. Thank you so much for the conversation too. always appreciate, the chats and just thinking about too, and the things you've learned over the years for anybody who might be struggling. Um, what would you say to them?
Um, I think for me, as I kind of mentioned earlier, you know, there was this massive fear that alcohol was such a big part of my identity. And if I gave that up or even worded it as something that I had to give up, as if I'm like depriving myself of something, I would lose the people that mattered to me. I would lose the parts of myself that were the best parts. But I read this quote like when I was, going through the first year of sobriety, and it said, the people who you lose on your healing journey are only supposed to be with the unhealed version of you. And
Mm,
that just like really spoke to me because I was so scared with that person that I made myself smaller. I made myself, like as you said, wearing all of the masks. Like I never showed up authentically as myself. I showed up as what I thought people wanted me to be.
mm,
And, I was dishonest and I was really miserable and just struggling constantly and kind of still trying my best to like, put a smile on people's faces and put a smile on my
mm,
own face, but it never felt like it really fit. Um, and I think that as soon as I just realized that like if I if I do this for myself, which is what I did on my 30th birthday,
mm,
that's it doesn't matter whatever falls away and whatever doesn't make it through to the other side on the roller coaster of whatever this is isn't supposed to
mm,
be there. And I think that through my journey I've realized that things like that I'm an introvert, and I would like die rather than admitting that when I was younger, because all I wanted to be was an extrovert. All I wanted to be was the center of the party, and that's my worst nightmare now. And
mm,
I also have like a little neurodivergent brain which overthinks and stresses about everything and spirals and is so sensitive. But you know what? Despite everything that I've gone through, I would not change a thing. And
mm,
that's something that I always said. I was always like, I just wish I could be a normal drinker. But now I can sit
mm,
here and say, as I approach 3 years sober, I wouldn't change a thing about myself. I would, if someone said, you can drink tomorrow, I would choose not to,
mm,
because everything that I've been through has gotten to me where I am and has helped me to make these beautiful connections with people on such a deep level and allowed me
mm,
to be vulnerable and to help people feel seen and heard. And for me, it
mm.
just makes it all worth it. So I wouldn't change a thing. And I honestly mean
Wow,
that.
yeah. No, I'm with you on that too. It's such an interesting thing there, right? Because I feel like if you change one little thing, you hear it in football, right? Football is a game of inches, right? 1 inch here, 1 inch the other way. In life's a game of inches, right? And you change one little thing, you potentially don't end up anywhere near where you're at now. And I think that about my story with my family, with my kids, and where things are now. I'm like, if I would have changed one little thing, the where I'm at now is completely different. And I think if we're at peace with where we're at now, that's what I've always been after, And so I wouldn't go back and make any changes, even though, I wouldn't say I'm fully 110% happy with how things were. I think the thing that hits the most is just the way I treated other people.
100%.
I wasn't happy, obviously, about that. But I think, it with time and people see you do better and, people forgive, right? It's kind of an interesting thing. But yeah, I'm with you on that. It's if you change one little thing, right? You go left instead of right,
Yeah.
everything could change. And if you've ended up at a place where, you're enjoying it in the process, then that's beautiful.
And
Wow.
I think that I spent a lot of time dwelling on the past, and I feel for me it's not healthy and it's not productive. So
Mm,
when I say I wouldn't change a thing, I mean more about how I am as a person. So although I
mm,
can't drink, or I have a wild brain, an untamed, untethered brain that I sometimes
yeah.
can't control or struggle to regulate, or I don't get on with just anyone. Like, I'm not an extrovert, and I'm not putting myself out there, and I do struggle socially. Those things all make me. And those things were all things that I tried to change through alcohol. And now, as you said, the fact that we can show up authentically as ourselves, that's kind of doing our younger selves who maybe hurt others and hurt ourselves. That's doing us a service of forgiveness and of like freedom moving forward.
Yeah. Oh, that's incredible. I could go on and on with
I know
with questions, based on that there. But thank you again for catching up, and I appreciate it. Even with you sharing there towards the end, I mean, just how things operate for you. What I hear anyway is that this is far outside of your comfort zone and necessarily what you would set out to do. But you come on here, and I mean, your second time, and you do share a lot of your story on Instagram too, and I think that you just mentioned it there, right? Maybe for our younger self to say, I'm doing the thing now. So I really appreciate that you've done that, and, always been incredible.
Oh, you make it easy to come on here, honestly. So thank you for having me.
Yeah. All righty. Well, have a great Friday.
Thank you so much, and you. Happy weekend.
Well, there it is. Another incredible episode here on the podcast. Huge shout out to Saz. I'll drop the contact information to reach out in the show notes below. Incredible stuff. One quote that really stood out to me: if someone said you can drink tomorrow, I would choose not to. It's incredible progress from where things seem. I think for a lot of us in the beginning, a life without drinking just feels impossible. Like, it's really even a hard thing to even imagine. But it's the reality for so many people. It really is. There comes a time where alcohol loses its grip over you, and life is so much fuller without it, and you realize that. It might not happen in the first day or 2 or 3, but if you stick with it, you'll get to that point as well. Saz does such a good job sharing the honest and vulnerable story of how things look, and I always appreciate that. It's incredible. I know so many of you are going to be able to relate to the journey. And thank you for listening to another episode on the Sober Motivation Podcast. And I'll see you on the next one.